really what travel does is allow us to create some space for, I say create space for magic to happen. And that magic could look like a lot of different things. It could be space for healing. For me, when I was thinking, I traveled first when I was thinking about getting divorced, right? So it got me out of the commentary and the chaos of my life and allowed me space to like figure out who I am when no one is needing something from me. No one's commenting. People don't know me. Like, who am I? It's a really great way to rediscover and to discover yourself and also to feel empowered.
Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I have with me Dawn Pick Benson. She is a self-discovery travel coach and writer, and she's joining me today to explore how travel can be a powerful tool for transformation, especially during life's crossroads, whether it's divorce, a faith shift, or an identity crisis. And I love this conversation with Dawn because she has some really powerful moments in her life that really shifted, like her own divorce and her own crisis of faith and things not aligning with her true self. And it just feels like such a perfect conversation for you guys and really in alignment with the work that we do and the conversations that we all have. And that we have on the show. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dawn Pick Benson. Dawn, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you.
And when I say journey, I mean all the journeys. Well, let's start with your personal journey. So you kind of describe a pivotal moment in your life when you asked yourself, is this the life I imagined? What did that realization feel like when the answer was kind of a resounding no? And how did it propel you forward towards your own divorce?
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember it vividly too. I was in the midst of a divorce that was difficult. And as what happens with a lot of people, I also was not sure I loved my career. And in that is me questioning my faith. And I come to this point of, is this the life I actually imagined? I remembered myself as a little girl who had these big dreams and who, wanted to grow up and have this amazing life. And I knew when my answer was no, that my second question to myself was, okay, so am I brave enough to do anything about this? And so that sent me on this odyssey of travel. Actually, I went to an unusual place, to the country of Kosovo, and to just start to kind of deconstruct those things of like, okay, am I actually brave enough, first of all, to step out and unpack all of this and unpeel the layers and figure out, like, when you start to ask that question, then I remember it just sort of felt like the ground beneath me suddenly was squishy or non-existent, right? Like,
sure,
thought,
right? Yes.
Oh my gosh, because you're stepping into absolutely the unknown, and I needed to know if I was willing to step into it.
Right. When you put a question like that so pointedly to yourself, or even as we are in this conversation to others, it does. I like the image of the ground just sort of melting away, like, wow, right? And there's a freedom in that, but then there's also a terror.
Right. Because all of the things that I knew, all of the things I had planned in my life or assumed would be the case, all of a sudden there were possibilities that none of them would be there. When you're talking about your marriage, but also looking at your career and your faith, like, to me, it felt like everything suddenly was just up for grabs. And I felt like I was in a free fall and I was
Mhm.
terrified, to be
Yeah.
honest. I like that part was not a good story for me. I
Yeah.
was absolutely terrified. But I also knew that little girl that I remembered thinking about and planning my life. I knew that she would be disappointed in me if I
Mm.
didn't step into this journey, if I wasn't brave enough to at least do something about the fact that my life was just starting to become unbearable. I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to figure this
Yeah.
out.
Right. You were honoring her, really.
Yeah.
You have talked about sort of grappling with what you believe about or believed about marriage and divorce. So, how did your faith and your cultural background influence your perspectives? And then, how did you have to shift that?
I grew up in a somewhat conservative Christian family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was definitely taught that divorce is not something that you do. It's not okay. There are specific reasons that you might be able to get divorced, but it was pretty cut and dried. And so when
Right.
I started to think about the fact that in order for me to be a whole healthy person, I
Mhm.
might need to get out of this marriage. And what does that look like? What does that look like? What does that mean for my faith? Because I knew that if I stepped into that space, that there would be a whole lot of things that happened after that. I not only was in a somewhat conservative Christian world, I also worked in a community in which that was at a small Christian college. So
Oh,
like there were layers of you step into this, it's not going to go unnoticed. It's not there will be
sure.
consequences.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I kept it meant like there were a lot of potential ramifications for me
Mm-hmm.
asking these questions. I knew that people would, in Christian world, we talk about the slippery slope, like you're going down a slippery slope asking these questions. But I knew I needed to ask them. I knew that I also have always had a really strong connection with the divine. And I
Mm.
knew that if I kept going the way I was in the relationship that I had, I felt like I was becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And in that way, I don't think we can have a really good relationship with the divine when we're not our true selves. I think that that's part of who we are as people, and our trajectory in life is to become our full selves. And when you become smaller and smaller and smaller in a relationship, then I was more and more unable to really even feel like I could connect with God, because I felt like I was just like a shell of a person. And so, in an interesting way, it was my faith that forced me to ask the questions about my faith, right? Or
Right. I
or
love
my
that. Right.
connection to the divine,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to sever it a little bit of like there's the Christianity I grew up with, and then for me, I had to look at, I just, what if there is this wider, deeper, more generous version of faith that is different than what I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the journey I went on, is looking into what does that look like? Because I start asking questions about marriage, then I'm, by default asking questions about my faith too, in the world that I lived in. So, which I don't know if you want me to get into this, but when I went overseas to Kosovo, that is part of the, like, I don't know that I knew that on purpose and I didn't design it that way, but I look back now and it was the perfect place for me to go, to just
Mm-hmm.
allow myself to ask questions, because it is such a place that is used to dissonance. And it allowed, because it's a diverse place in Europe, and it's a crossroads. And so there's a lot of diversity around here. And it allowed me to feel like I could just widen my faith without critique. There wasn't anyone here going, "Oh my gosh, you can't ask that question." They were almost encouraging me to ask questions. No one was aghast that I was asking things. And it really was this place that allowed me the space to just ask the questions I needed to ask.
So I have so many questions about this, one of which is, why Kosovo, which I think is a sort of a pertinent question. But also, what I hear you saying, and I want to sort of check in with you about this, is that in a sense, you were what I'm hearing, right, is that you were kind of detangling your faith from the institution, the messaging of the institution from the what you knew in your heart about your connection, your belief in God, your faith as separate from the religious doctrine.
Yes,
Is that fair
absolutely.
to say? Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's a good way to say
Right.
it.
What drew you to Kosovo, and how did that journey mirror this internal transformation that you were experiencing?
I didn't just pick Kosovo randomly because that would,
Yeah, it sounds like
I'm sure that would
you
be
spun a globe and like your finger. Okay, that's it.
I think I'll go here to this
Yeah.
random place.
Right. This war-torn country.
Yes, yes. I actually had been here before a few different times. So it is a place that's familiar to me. And when I knew that this tumult was going inside, I have friends here, and it felt kind of like a safe place to go, even though it was a little bit strange because I had been here many times with my then husband. So this time I was going on my own, but it still felt like it was a leap, but it was something that still felt somewhat safe because I'd been here before. Although the difference this time, and really where the bravery came in, is I hadn't been here before alone before. So, and I hadn't traveled in a long time alone. So, what did that look like for me to handle my own travels, etc., to come here? But yeah, I did come. I came because I had been here before, so I didn't just pick it out of a hat. But I honestly, I felt a pull to come here, and I do feel that way. I think a lot of us were attracted to certain cultures or countries, and sometimes this might sound a little woo-woo, but I feel like sometimes countries and places have things to say to us. When I look back at it, I think that this place has had things to say to me that has things that I could learn from the culture, from the people. And I really do think I was drawn back here because I needed to be here. Because I could, because it was a place that no one was going to critique me. Kosovo is like 97% Muslim, but they're very open about it. And it's very interesting during the holidays here when there are church services in the Catholic Church. You'll see the Muslims and Catholics together at this service. They really celebrate one another's different events. And that was really wonderful for me to see too, to just see how, wow, these people who have very different beliefs are celebrating one another, and look at the spaciousness that they give to each other. And, as juxtaposed the world I had been, where, that's, everything's sort of cut and dried. This is right. This is wrong. Like, you don't celebrate other people's holidays, etc. And so it was put front and center in my face to just kind of see that, wow, the world is so much wider, and there's just all these different ways to do it. And then I also just met different people who also were Christians here who had very different views from the world I was in. And that's also pushed me to ask questions as well of like, wow, if I have a very American version of faith, and that's not the version, right?
Right. And all of the religious, the dogma that comes along with certainly American conservative Christian faith, which, is so much of it, in my humble opinion, has nothing to do with faith. Right. It's actually, or much to do with Jesus either. So it's,
right.
and I love that inclusivity. Like, you talk about the diversity and the inclusivity that you found when you got there. I think that's just, it's so beautiful. And to me, right, as somebody who, by the way, is not religious, and, I was raised with all sorts of things, right? But I was raised reading and studying the Bible as literature and as historic text, right? So I actually have read it.
Right.
And have studied it. I remember going to church services as a little girl and sort of hearing the messages in the sermons and looking around and seeing things not adding up and not connecting, and the hypocrisy of some of the teachings that I was hearing, that to me, I was like, but I read that in the Bible and it doesn't say what it says, right? And so to go to a place where you can feel that alignment, right? And that inclusivity must have been so beautiful.
Yeah. I just had these really beautiful experiences. And honestly, actually, an interesting fact about Kosovo is that Mother Teresa has a connection here. She's Albanian, and Kosovo is mostly Albanian
Mm-hmm.
population. And so there's a cathedral here named after her. I had a really amazing experience there on Christmas Eve one year where just watching all of these people from different walks of life there together celebrating, people who were clearly not Catholic. And you kind of tell because they didn't really know all the rules,
Right.
emotions, etc. But they were,
Right.
I asked my friends who are local here too, and they're like, yeah, that's what we do. We celebrate one another's holidays when we have iftar. We invite our other friends. So it's this inclusivity that I didn't see as much in the US, at least in the Midwest where I grew up, in the world that I was in. And I look back and I don't know that I knew that on purpose, but it was this perfect place for me to just allow my faith to widen. I remember this. I had this conversation. A friend of mine's dad is a Sufi Muslim, and we started talking about God together and through translation because he didn't speak English. And so my friend was translating. And I just remember the look on his face when he was talking about God, how much, like, the love with which he was speaking
Mm.
for the divine. And
Mm.
it's one of the things that one of the things that helped unravel some of the stuff for me, because I felt it was almost like I could feel a connection between he and I, of like, oh my gosh, he's talking about the exact same God that I'm taught, that I believe in. And I was taught these are different things, right? And
That's
I
right.
I had this profound experience where I looked into his eyes and I was like, this guy loves God and his, and who am I? Like, okay, so I remember just sort of thinking, oh my gosh, everything I was taught about who's in and who's out and who's right and wrong, it can't be true because I see his face and I feel it. I feel his love for God, and I could not undo that. And I could never say that it wasn't true because I felt it so palpably. And I couldn't walk, like, that moment. I couldn't walk away. That it was maybe the impetus of everything. I was like, I can't unsee that. I can't
Right.
experience that. And it has to change how I start looking at things. And then me just also learning to pay attention to myself, to how I feel inside, to that wisdom that's inside of me, was a huge thing too along my journey. And I think I learned that a lot here too, just by walking and listening to what's going on inside of me. Because I also, if you're in a conservative Christian faith, you're often taught that your heart's evil and that you shouldn't listen to that internal
Yes.
voice, to your intuition. I was really taught not to. And then it was this epiphany of, oh my gosh, there's so much wisdom inside, though. There's so much
Yes.
there. So I
Yeah.
feel like I just said a whole lot of things. So
You did. You said whole lot of wonderful things that I know will really resonate with my audience. And one of the things, I talk about all the time, especially with my clients, is connecting with that inner sense of knowing and with that intuition. I have a chapter about it in my book. I mean, it's one of the most important things that we have. What's so interesting is the idea of being told to sort of disconnect from it, but you can't trust it because, like, that's the devil. That's the devil working inside you or whatever. And it's like, or it's God working in me, right? If that's not faith, then I don't, like, what is, right? Isn't
right.
faith the idea of trusting that, yes, it's trusting God, but it's also trusting your trust in God, right? And so
Mhm.
how could you have that if you were disconnected from yourself?
Right. It's really true. It's kind of, it's very interesting to me that I, I believed that
Yeah.
for so long, or that I didn't think about it. But once I connected it and understood how important that intuition, and that I believe now that internal voice, that intuition that's divine wisdom. That's God speaking to you. Rather than ignoring it, it's actually really
Yes.
valuable and has things to say. And I think maybe I have this really amazing therapist, and I think maybe he's the one who at first pointed this dissonance out to me. And I started thinking about it and realizing that, oh my gosh, he's right. I can pay attention to what's going on inside of me. So, and it's part of the magic too, is in having people around you who ask you important questions, who ask you hard questions, who, et cetera. I'm like really lucky that I had people in my life who spoke into it and helped me on my way because I kind of needed that push, or I needed someone to say, like, actually, you could actually listen to yourself.
Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure about your next step in the divorce process? You don't have to do this alone, my love. If you're listening to this podcast, you already know that I am a pioneer in the divorce coaching industry, and that for over a decade, I've helped hundreds of women navigate some of the toughest decisions of their lives. Until recently, I only worked with clients in a long-term private capacity. But I know that not everyone needs or has the ability to commit to long-term coaching. Sometimes you just need clear, focused strategies to move forward. That's why I now offer targeted 3-session strategy packages designed to give you the clarity, direction, and confidence you need without the long-term commitment. Whether you're deciding whether to stay or go, uncovering and healing from abuse, or dealing with a high-conflict divorce, I will help you create a clear roadmap, develop a plan to work with your attorney, saving you time and money, and help you navigate difficult conversations with ease. All coaching is done on Zoom, so no matter where you are, we can work together. No consultation call is needed. Just fill out a quick questionnaire and I'll get you all set up. Head on over to kateanthony.com/strategy and take the first step toward a stronger, more empowered future today. That's kateanthony.com/strategy. And I'll talk to you soon. So now, right, you specialize in helping people. You are a self-discovery travel coach. And so obviously travel became this huge epiphany for you in your post-divorce world. And that's the area that you specialize. How do you see travel in general being this? I mean, for you, it was a very specific catalyst and epiphany for your growth. How do you see this translating to others? And how do you help women who might feel that they don't have the time, they don't have the money, or they have children, right? How do you help them sort of understand the benefit of travel for their own self-development and connection?
Yeah, it's interesting that we were just talking about listening to ourselves, because the way that I coach women now is very focused on listening to yourself. So I think that anyone who even has sort of an inkling on wanting to travel, or thinking about, maybe I want to go away to get some clarity or healing, I specialize in working with women who are often in the middle of a life transition. So they're either left a relationship, or they are newly retired, or their kids are grown up, right? So they're in this space of, what should I do? Like, what's next for me? I'm kind of feeling lost. And so what I do, the very first I run this program called Brave Journey. And the very first thing we do, Brave is an acronym, and the B is befriend yourself. So it's really like learning a lot about yourself and who you are and what you need. And I do think that when people are thinking about, I really want to travel, that there's often something you're wanting to feel. So we look at that, like, what is the thing that you're wanting to feel inside? And let's figure out how to make a journey that gets you there. Because I think it's interesting. People, watched read Eat, Pray, Love, watched the movie. A lot of people wanted to follow that journey, and it doesn't work just to follow someone else's journey, because
that was Liz Gilbert's journey.
Right. We are looking for something for ourselves. And so I teach a lot of paying attention to that inner knowing, and traveling based on that. So, and your question about it being a catalyst for growth is, I think that really what travel does is allow us to create some space for, I say create space for magic to happen. And that magic could look like a lot of different things. It could be space for healing. For me, when I was thinking, I traveled first when I was thinking about getting divorced, right? So it got me out of the commentary and the chaos of my life, and allowed me space to like figure out who I am when no one is needing something from me. No one's commenting. People don't know me. Like, who am I? It's a really great way to rediscover and to discover yourself and also to feel empowered. It just sort of often really creates space for what you need. And the work that I do is helping women to kind of figure out what is that you need. Let's look at that. Like it looks different for different women. Like one woman who's been my client in Brave Journey, I have them paint a picture of what's the most amazing, beautiful travel journey you can imagine. And then we look at how are you feeling in that picture. So she painted this tranquil, inspirational view, like in southern France. She's having a coffee. Her kids don't need anything from her. She's reading a book. She's enjoying the sun. So we knew that what she's looking for is to be peace, is to have some peace and feel inspired and a little bit empowered because she's so that, going on her trip. But there was another woman in the same time at the program with her who, when she painted a picture, she was like, I want to feel vibrant and alive. And, she ended up going to Greece where she was kayaking in the Aegean Sea and driving a stick shift through the roads. And, she wanted to feel a very different trip, right? But the magic is in figuring out what is that trip for you, which is really different than when you're working with a travel agent. They're not going to ask you a lot of these questions. But if I can help you suss out, like, what is your soul yearning for? Let's create that for you, because not everyone wants to go on the same kind of trip, and even for me, my pre-divorce trip was, my question was, am I brave enough? So I needed to feel brave. So I did a lot of things that helped me to feel brave during that time. Like I made a little bit of a crazy itinerary just so that I could figure out, just so I knew I could actually do it. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Second time after I was divorced, when I went, I just needed peace. I needed to feel loved and cared for. And, I came back again to Kosovo that time because I had friends here and because I knew I could just kind of hunker down and just heal. And that's what I needed then. So,
a lot of people, one of the parts of that question too, that I want to sort of circle back to is that, many women feel they're trapped in their circumstances. They're unable to escape even for a short trip because they've again, financial constraints or time constraints or children, all of that. So what would you say to someone who feels like travel or any form of self-discovery, but probably travel in particular, is sort of out of reach for them?
I'm also a big believer in local things because I think you can do the same idea when you're home. And I do. Yeah. I live part of my time overseas, but part of it in Michigan. And when I'm home, I'll wake up in the morning and be like, what am I needing to feel today? And sometimes I'll block off a day or even a few hours, and to ask yourself that question, what am I needing or wanting to feel? And do something that helps you get there. So it doesn't have to be even a whole day, but it could be like, if I'm just looking for peace, do something that brings that to you. Sure. Or if I'm looking for inspiration, do that. Part of the magic of travel to me is making space for yourself, for you to hear yourself. And so maybe you do that. Maybe you just go somewhere that's not far away, that's not expensive, that we often can carve out more time than we realize as well. So there's that pace too. If it becomes important and you really want it, I think we find ways to carve it out and can sometimes, make a lot of reasons of why we can't. But even if you just start small, where it's like, I'm just going to take a day for me. I do that periodically for myself. Sometimes I call it the day of delight, where I just do anything that makes me smile today. I'm going to go do if I'm in a space where I'm needing something like that. So that might be a way to travel without costing as much. I also know that travel actually can cost a lot less than people realize as well. But that would be a whole different conversation.
Well, actually, no, I mean, what are your top tips for that, for making it cost less than we might think?
Yeah. And I do, it does depend obviously on your time constraints too, and getting a little bit creative. And there's all kinds of things. My first idea is not necessarily helpful if you don't have, if you only have a few days, but I do know that if you travel and you are going, if you can stay somewhere a month, you get a massive discount. Like for example, in an Airbnb, sometimes it will cost the same amount for 2 weeks as it does to stay an entire month in a place. So, and I know now I say that because a lot of people can work remotely now. And so if that's doable for some people, that's something to think about, because then you're there and you're not necessarily eating out all the time because you're there long enough that you can go to the grocery store, etc. You're also spending a lot less. So that is for sure a cost saving. Also, going to places that are a little bit off the beaten path is always going to save you money, and doing a little bit of the work around that. Yeah, there's so many. I feel like I could say a lot of different things.
People will have to get in touch with you to get your top tips on saving money for that. For women who are listening, who are at this crossroads, whether it be divorce, which is most of my audience, obviously, but also these like faith shifts and identity crises that come, I think, so often come with divorce. What is one small step that they can take today to start to move towards that transformation?
I think it's listening to that little girl. Like for me, it'd be listening to that little girl inside, asking her what she wants and needs right now, and just taking one step toward that one tiny thing. You don't have to up and go overseas tomorrow, but maybe it's one step toward asking, is it possible? Is something different possible? So I think it starts with listening to that. You know, for me, it was that little 8-year-old girl who had big dreams, listening to her going, okay, I got you. Like, I hear you. This is not what we planned. I'm going to figure out how to be brave. And it started with just one question, like, could I get away for a while?
Right. And I love the idea of like, how do I want to feel? Like how, and for so many who are at this sort of crossroads in their lives, they don't even know, right? They're like, they don't even know how they feel now, like, let alone how they want to feel. Right. So it is that dropping in, like you said, even just like taking a walk and just dropping into yourself is hard, but also so important. You mentioned that BRAVE is an acronym. Can you tell us what the rest of it stands for?
So B is befriend yourself. That is so important to happen before you travel, to start with that piece of self-discovery and to not just jump into travel because you don't even know yet what you want or need. So getting to know yourself and your strengths. And I also think that allows you to start to go into your trip from a sense of empowerment versus I'm just along for the ride and I'm not sure what's happening.
I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone on a trip and I'm like, I just need to get out of here. I just need to get out of here. I need to go somewhere. And then I book the trip and then I come home and I'm like, I didn't get that wasn't what I wanted or needed because I didn't do that. So yes.
Exactly. And the more women I meet while I'm traveling who have done that, or as I work with women too, the more I'm convinced this is really important, is to have done some of this work before you go, or at least start it, because it really helps you understand what you're looking for in your trip and know more about yourself and your strengths, so that when you get into these weird situations that inevitably something might happen that you're uncomfortable with, you kind of know, well, like you know some of your strengths. I call them, tools in your backpack, where you can just, it's your toolkit for the unexpected. Like, I'm good at this. I can figure this out. Everyone has their own strengths, but if you know what yours are, then you come into the trip understanding that really well. R is for releasing old stories. So that's when we start kind of re-envisioning and expanding the possibilities for our lives. So looking at the old stories that have kept us safe, but that we want to expand into a new story and to new possibilities. And then A really is awakening to possibilities. So that's when we talk a lot about paying attention to that inner knowing and like what really is possible for my trip. What do I want to feel and experience on my trip? So that A really kind of focuses on that vision. What is the vision for my trip? How do I want to feel? And if I want to feel peaceful, then I'm going to go on a very different trip than if I want to feel brave, and maybe I'm going to go skydive, right? So it helps you narrow it down and pick and create something that really, I think, is what your soul is desiring. And so it resonates, like the transformation happens so much more deeply and easily when you've done some of that work ahead of time like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then V is voicing your fears, because inevitably, anytime you start thinking big about going on a trip and I'm going to have this amazing experience and I'm looking at the possibilities for this trip and also for my life, inevitably fear comes in where you're like, shit, what the hell was I thinking? Like, am I
Right.
actually, like I have one woman who woke up in Greece going, not feeling well, and she's like, shit, what was I thinking? Like, that what I'm 65 years old, what am I doing here? you know right? But I
Yeah.
want to normalize that because I travel all the time, and no, inevitably I'm afraid of something. Like, there is always fear involved. So
Mm-hmm.
to be able to step into that, and what I ideally in the Brave Journey process, what I'm teaching women is to make their vision greater than their fear. So once we start to get this vision of what we really want and need out of a travel experience, then the fear starts to get smaller and smaller, and we're willing to step into those fears because we want that vision so badly. So, like, one of the women I worked with named Robin, we were going through this process, and before she even got to France, she called me and she said, Dawn, and if you could see her when she began the Brave Journey process, she'd been married 40 years,
Yeah.
divorced, very fearful, but really kind of wanted to travel, but didn't exactly know how to do it on her own.
Uh-huh.
And she would have described herself frozen and fearful. By the time we went through this process and she got this really great vision of what she wanted, she was like, Dawn, I'm not even afraid anymore. I'm
Mm.
excited to go on this trip, and then
That's
she came
great.
back and she's like, I went to France for 3 weeks by myself. I can do anything. So
Yes.
to get back to
Yes.
the V is voice your fears, and E
Mm-hmm.
is enlist your people and embark. I really
Mm.
also think it's important to have people around you when you travel who know that you're doing this for a purpose, who know that you're trying to get something, that you're trying to experience, like whether it's healing or clarity, etc., that they really understand what you want out of your trip, and that they can encourage you in that
Yeah.
in that piece. They're not just
Absolutely.
the people who are like, can I see your pictures? Okay, that's nice. And then they move on. These are the people
Yeah.
who know what's going on in your life. And when I do this, when I speak of the Brave Journey program, it's a small group program. And so a
Mm.
lot of times the women in that program become also each other's people, right? They know
Right.
the story, they know what each other is trying to get out of the trip. And then they are also those people who really cheer you on in the process, who are like, oh my,
Mm.
excited that you're doing what you're doing. Because we often can also have a lot of naysayers in our life that think travel is frivolous, or, what are you thinking? Or do you have time? And all those things. So to
Mm-hmm.
have people who understand the importance of it and what you might get out of it, it's really important.
Amazing. Dawn, this has been such a great conversation because it's not just about get out there and go on some adventure. There is this spiritual reshaping
Mhm.
that you're talking about that is such an important piece of what you're doing. And
Yes, yes.
yeah, it's really important. So where can everybody find you, and tell us a little bit more about your Brave program? I mean, obviously we just did, but where can they find it?
You can find me on my website is my full name, Dawn Pick Benson. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but dawnpickbenson.com is my website. And that has all the information about Brave Journey in it. Also on Instagram and Facebook by the same name. I'm sure it'll be spelled out in your show notes.
It will.
But that is how you find me. I'm starting a new Brave Journey cohort this spring, and I usually do this once or twice a year. I keep it small so that people get to know one another, and it really is a small group of women who know they want to go on a life-changing solo trip, and while they're planning it together as a community, because I think community is so important when you're in the middle of
Mm-hmm.
transitions, and
Yes,
people
it
who are
is.
just understand and get it. I needed that. I really I created Brave Journey out of the things that I know were instrumental in my own changes in my life. And then I interviewed a bunch of women as well, and just kind of created something out of that information. And then, yeah, the community piece is so important. So each plan their own trip. We have a little party every time someone goes on their trip to send them off. And then it's really kind of a full wraparound experience. You go off on your trip, you have some coaching time with me while you're away to either troubleshoot or just celebrate. And then when you come back, we talk about what happened, because that is a piece that people don't talk about a lot, but it is so important. And there's a lot of research around it that shows the return is almost more important. It is at least as important as the trip in the way that you're processing it. Like, what just happened to me on that trip? Whether, some people have these amazing epiphanies, some people come back disappointed about something. Let's process that. Let's talk about what you learned and how you can continue to grow and to keep discovering and rediscovering and learning about yourself, so that it's a full wraparound experience. When you come back, we also talk about what happened and how you can take some of the things that you learned and experienced and bring those into your normal everyday life, because you can't always be on a trip, right?
Right. This is so great. So you have a new cohort starting in the spring. Do you know when yet?
Yeah, it'll be around April 15th-ish. I usually see how, who I have and what works for them, because it's a small group. I tailor it pretty easily to people. I also am doing a retreat to Lake Ohrid, Macedonia in the end of September. So that is going to be, I like doing small groups, so I'll keep it's limited to 8 women. We're staying in a villa in this place that I just think is pure magic, called Lake Ohrid, Macedonia. I was just there this fall, and I like how I talked about, I think places have things to say. I really felt strongly this place has something to say to women in the middle of transition, and to some strong women. Like, it's just this very interesting otherworldly place, and I absolutely love it, and I'm super excited to bring some women there with me.
That sounds really good. That sounds really good. Dawn, this has been so great. I really appreciate your wisdom and clarity and sharing your personal journey throughout. Everything you say is just so resonant to me, and I know it will be to my audience. So guys, Dawn Pick Benson, that's PickBenson, like Olivia Benson. Random SVU reference, if anybody caught that. DawnPickBenson.com. Go check it out. Let's get on these journeys, guys. Let's get out there and live. Thanks, Dawn.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a fun chat.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at The Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.